That's great. That's great. All right. Well, maybe we should get going. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for your patience and allowing us to put last week's call off. I needed to get away and was up in the mountains, which was awesome. Kind of trying to practice social distancing. One of the things that was really mind blowing to me is our ranch is in near Cody, Wyoming, 80 miles outside the town. So when we got there, we were driving in through Cody, and 0 people had masks. And 0 people everybody said, this is a hoax, it's total BS, it's not a big deal. And literally during the 10 days we were there, it went from 0 cases to about 100 cases. And yeah, it's all of a sudden. So as we were driving back through yesterday, everybody had their masks on, and all of a sudden, the fear of God had been shaken into them. So really interesting to see a conservative place like Cody have such a mental model shift really, really quickly. So hey, I thought since it's been a couple of weeks, we just do a little catch up with everybody and see how everybody's doing. And just I think a lot of people have some really interesting stuff that they've been working on, and just thought it'd be fun to kind of hear what's happening with the community. But first, I thought we'd start off with our breakout sessions. So Brandon, I think we'll give a little bit more time today, just because it's always such an enjoyable part of the call. So if you remember, usually we have a topic or we do something, but kind of back to the, maybe the red, yellow, green, like what in your life is going well, green, what's kind of, wobbly, yellow, and what are some issues you're worried about, kind of red. So anyway, Brandon, can you take us away?
You got it. We'll see you all in about
a few minutes.
But not intentionally.
Yeah. No, sorry. Oh, thanks. I hope everybody enjoy that?
That's always my favorite part. Well, one of my favorite parts.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I love
networking is great.
I think I was mid-sentence when it pulled me back. So yeah, pretty awesome.
That's trouble.
No, that's
I heard, Brandon, you were talking about the MIT Summit. Hey, Diane, you were involved with that. Like, tell us, how did it go? What happened? Oh, you're on mute. Yeah, no worries.
It was off the charts. Really, really great. It's such an interesting time for platforms, right? The COVID has really affected different platforms very differently. Some on the supply side, some on the demand side, and some are just absolutely. It was a great day. How many folks actually attended? Did anyone go?
I heard they had, this is Brandon, I heard they had 850 people. I don't know if that included paying, all paying attendees or a mix of folks, but yeah, 850.
Yeah, so room capacity was no longer a constraint. So, they opened it up, and a lot of folks showed up, and it was really good. So the recording will be available afterwards. So I'll see if I can get a link to the materials. But we had some folks in from traditional legacy businesses talking about their digital transformation, Siemens, and then we had some folks from businesses in China that were digital natives. So it was a really nice mix. But anyway, check out the recording if you can. It's good stuff.
Hey, Diane, I know there's been some questions in the chat on like what event is it? So could you describe like the event and then what was the genesis of the event at MIT? Because I think it's a really important part of the discussion.
It is. So the event's been around for I think about 8 years now, and it is the MIT Platform Summit. It's hosted on an annual basis at MIT, this year digital, and has been co-sponsored by MIT, IDE, and my business partners at Platform Strategy Institute. So the gentleman that co-authored Platform Revolution, and Jeffrey Parker and Marshall Van Alstyne, and my other partner, Peter Evans, a fellow GE alum. They have co-sponsored the MIT Platform Summit for several years now, and really, this has been a really important summit to convene platform natives and legacy businesses that are shifting to platform business models so that everyone can kind of come together, understand what it means to be a platform business, what the critical issues are, whether that's talent or regulatory issues, regulatory environment, sharing best practices, and the agenda is really designed for product leaders and business leaders to equip them with the networking and the understanding in order to be successful in a platform business operation. So it's evolved. It's kind of grown up with the industry, but they always get heavy hitters in from industry to share their journey and their perspective.
That's great. Thanks, Diane. Yeah, I read Platform Revolution. Maybe it came out like 3 or 4 years ago, and just such an impressive book. It's highly recommended to everyone here.
Yeah.
There you go. That's it right there. So get it and check it out. I think it's a really great thing that ladders up to a lot of the stuff we do every day. So, all right. Well, let's see. Who else was I thinking about? What's Jerry? What's happening, Jerry Wynn? What's happening in your world? What are you seeing? What are you hearing? You're always kind of at the cutting edge. You're working on, finishing up a new book that we've talked about a little bit.
Well, the book is on transformation in times of crisis. It really focuses on the new reality and what can people do to try to leverage what's happening today as new opportunities. And the area that we started discussing at the break that we had here was the application to education and learning. So one of my other initiatives, John, you know it, is the Reimagine Education. And this year, the conference, instead of having the annual conference reporting on the winners of the competition, we're going to have it as a virtual conference. We canceled the San Francisco meeting, but we're going to have it virtual. But we are encouraging competition submissions. We typically have over 1,000 submissions for innovative approaches. And the focus this year is on 2 things. And anyone on the call that's doing anything in this area, please apply or get to me. The one is, how do we increase the engagement and effectiveness of online education that everyone is dealing with? It is not only university, because every company now is engaged with education online. And the second is the reality, once you can combine online education with physical presence, what will be the next generation flipped classroom 2.0 and the like. So anyone's doing any kind of interesting work in this area and would like to share it with us would be great, and submit to the competition.
Great. Thanks, Jerry. That's awesome. Really, really appreciate it. Hey, Catherine. I see Catherine's waving. Hey, John Healy, what's happening in your world? What are you seeing? What are you hearing out there?
My world's chaotic these days, but human agility is where we're spending our time right now. Kind of looking at, it's a parallel of the Maslow hierarchy and looking at how that's impacting people's lives and how they connect with work. So looking at the base needs around sustainability in the short term, everyone's desire to get all the way to the peak of that pyramid of whether it's self-enlightenment or what we're calling human agility, and the impacts of momentum, positive and negative momentum in between, and seeing what different systems and platforms are impacting that. So that's a big core of research that we're keyed into at this point.
That's cool. Any initial insights from that?
Yeah, we got a stack. On our little run for the sprint next week. I am going to be exiting a piece of it on Wednesday, presenting 6 topics to the Institute for Corporate Productivity. One is on being human, one is on connection and collaboration, the other on purpose and meaning, sustainability versus sustainagility, education and experience, and then rethinking the service economy. So 6 different areas that we're diving into. We should be publishing something on it shortly, and I'll be happy to share links and get things out to people. Partnered with a a consumer research company called Stylus, who I've just really been impressed with, who looks at everything from the B2C marketplace as opposed to looking at, from the B2B side, they avoid the B2B end. So just fun group to work with.
Yeah, that's great. Well, yeah, we look forward to that. And thanks for sharing that. That's exciting. Hey, Gabe from Brain Trust, are you on? I know you guys just did some new research, and would love to have you share some of the highlights of what you found.
Yeah, hey, this is Gabe. I just want to make sure my audio is good. It was cutting out there for a second. You can hear me, John?
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, great. So yeah, Gabe here from Brain Trust. Yeah, we just completed some research on a project that we just published called the Talent-Led Revolution, a Shift Towards a User-Owned Economy. So what we were exploring there was we kind of looked at three kind of different dimensions. First dimension is we interviewed a bunch of talents. We interviewed people that were leaving Google, leaving Facebook, entering the ranks of full-time professional freelancing. We also interviewed a bunch of companies like Nestle, Steve, I think Jen from NASA was in it. Folks from Deloitte, PwC, and a bunch of others. And then we also interviewed some academics like Tessa Forshoff, who's one of the lecturers on future work at Harvard. And so we're basically looking at those different dimensions, and like there was kind of three core things that came out of it that were really interesting. I think we'll be happy to share a link with you guys. The first that we found was that this isn't this freelance movement is one that people are actually leaving companies here in Silicon Valley where I live, right? Like they're sick of being on a 2-hour bus ride down to Google. They're sick of not having any ownership or autonomy over the decisions that they make or what they get to work on or when they get to work or where they get to work, right? And this talent-led revolution is very specific to highly skilled technical talent that actually has the opportunity to leave, and they know that there's a global demand for their skills, right? So the first adopters here of this like full-time freelance is really kind of the highly skilled people that every single company on the planet wants to hire. So that was really interesting. A bunch of stats around kind of what these people want from work, what's changed for them about work. The second thing that we explored was, I'll say, like how like access and use of distributed talent can unlock like disruptive potential, specifically for more legacy organizations and enterprises that are going through digital transformation or going through like a shift from retail to e-commerce. And so we really explored kind of like, all right, what kind of unlocks can this provide for large enterprises? And then the third is we explored like, what kind of companies are doing this well? For instance, folks like Nestle, that are these massive, $100 billion companies, but yet are really innovating in the space of distributed work and moving the ball forward there. So it is really a fascinating research paper, and I think we just actually published it on our website. I'm sure maybe Ian could link to it. Oh, she already has above.
Yeah. Thanks, Gabe. The link is in the chat. Really appreciate that. I think it's important that we all share research we're doing or we're in touch with and put that together. Sheila, you and I had a really great conversation this morning via email. I thought it was really interesting, like what you're finding in the life science space on freelancers using kind of on platform, off platform, right? Like the adoption of platforms by highly skilled and highly established, freelancers. Any thoughts?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Actually, so what this is a survey of the independent workforce in life sciences R&D, and these are just preliminary results. So we haven't completed the entire analysis yet, but on the question of how the freelancers found their work, so they're completely independent, they have their own entities, so on and so forth, multiple clients. Less than 5% find their work through staffing firms. Less than 11% find their work through specialized consulting firms, which are also fairly prevalent in this space. So and the numbers are similarly low for platforms. So these folks right now are actually not on a platform at all. 70% of their work is found through referrals, and they go direct to the hiring entities. So they are, it's kind of like the Wild West pretty much. And these are very elite, the exact type of resources that you described. They're the life sciences equivalent of these like incredible groups of talent that are leaving Google and Microsoft and whatnot. And another thing that we're finding is autonomy, although we used a different word in the survey, is the number one reason. They just want control over their own destiny, and they feel very confident they can manage that.
Great, that's great input. It kind of, hey, Paul, Estes, you know, you're always in touch with research and thinking about things all the time. How does that jive? Like this idea that there's this kind of organic, you know, in the life sciences space, right? There's this organic freelance marketplace that people just connect through reputation and, you know, and connect directly. And certainly the awesome platforms that are out there that, you know, that can help reduce friction in that. Where are you seeing that? And, you know, what conversations you've been having lately?
I think the interesting thing that people have been reaching out to me a lot on LinkedIn is that a lot of the knowledge work professionals that we see are actually using LinkedIn. You know, we talk a lot about the platforms and the other freelance platforms. And I think to the point of, you know, if I'm technical, if I'm an engineer, I'm a front-end engineer, I'm very, very specific, those platforms, including TopTal, you know, provide, you know, work and have high utilization rates, some of them. But a lot of people are leveraging LinkedIn. So when I think of platforms, I think one of the things that we don't talk about a lot for knowledge work specifically, and I do agree that, you know, this freelance revolution, people that are leaving big companies are highly skilled, or they've been in the game for 20 years and, you know, they're hanging up a shingle to provide value. But I'm seeing a lot of freelance connections and work happen on LinkedIn. And so it's kind of one of the things I'm starting to explore. As people know, like I play with LinkedIn to try to understand how it relates and how it could help freelancing.
Can I make a point there, John? Is that just something to tag on, which both of you guys mentioned, which is really interesting. And we found this in our research, which is that very specifically the people that are like top of the game in their respective categories. So that may be in life science. In our world, this is like, you know, product people and developers. These people, one of the reasons that they haven't made it onto a lot of other platforms is that they don't want to pay, they don't have to pay 30-40% rakes to middlemen, right? Like, and so they have more, there's more demand for their skills than there are those people in the world. So some of the reason that you haven't seen them move on to platforms is because the traditional model is basically take a big rake out of whatever they make. So it kind of keeps those people off of the platforms.
You know, can I jump in, John?
Yeah.
Do you mind if I jump in? So part of our research, just to capitalize on what you just said, Gabe, and I actually just heard this, one of these elite independent consultants who bills out between $200 and $250 an hour, over 20 years experience, you know, very, very highly specified, is being contacted, and in her particular subject matter expertise, it's in high demand because of COVID-19 and being life sciences. Getting contacted by agencies, she didn't name exactly who, but asking her to do work for $75 an hour. And you know, I hear this very often, that it's unbelievable that that anybody could take a look at somebody like her. And I mean, she has a very well-known industry position. She's pretty much famous, and actually expect her to work for $75 an hour. And this is happening very frequently. And she pretty much laughed at the guy, but still it happens so frequently. She asked me about it.
Well, it's definitely, thanks. It's definitely an evolving market. Hey, Brian, you know, you've got an interesting perspective at MBO because you represent the independent, you know, worker, and, you know, we've had a lot of great conversations about this. Any thoughts on kind of this dynamic, or on platform, off platform?
Well, I think I love Gabe's observation, and it's certainly one that we often share when we talk to a lot of companies, that the most talented people choose to work independently. You know, if you are at the top of your game, you want to monetize your skill, your experience for yourself. And so that is certainly a huge part of the conversation, and that's where we see a lot of success. we're really trying to understand ways to keep people engaged within the platform, because we feel most people in this economy multi-home. I mean, they probably sign up for dozens of them, right? Because the cost to join and the expense and the necessarily wider net to more opportunities are what's going to be critical. So the real differentiation when we look at relative platforms is less about the number of bodies in the building and more about the percentage of re-engagements. And so the real success metric of a successful platform or open talent solution is going to be less about the number of people that are working, but the number of the people that are working on successive or re-engagement solutions. So we're obsessively looking at ways to address that, to keep people engaged within a given platform.
Yeah.
That's been a big thing for us. And I think also Sheila brings up a really good point that is a struggle for a lot of organizations as a whole, is to identify the relative value of independent talent relative to the assumed alternative. Because I'm sure Sheila would agree that that resource with that wealth of experience, they're worth more than $75, but proving and monetizing and identifying the incremental value for that is the real challenge. And as an enterprise, you have to put some sort of guardrails around controlling expenses, obviously, but a lot of the traditional sort of nomenclature around managing markups, managing statutory expenses, and managing those engagement costs kind of fall apart when you're dealing with more high-skilled individuals. You know, you can't commoditize someone with a unique skill set. I think Jeff Davis we talked to him during our breakout. He had one of the most interesting skill sets as a space medicine specialist. I mean, if I was a corporate buyer, how would I develop a policy for someone with Jeff's unique expertise? That's not something that would fall into a rate card or a bill rate. And I think until we can build some sort of organizational disciplines around how you contain those costs, it's going to be an issue we're going to struggle with forever.
John, can I jump in this conversation? So,
yeah. I was going to call on you, Ashir. Ashir's from EY, so.
So we run a direct sourcing platform called GigNow. And so, these are all the same sort of challenges that we struggled with, right, in the early days of sort of formulating this. And I think one of the big things that I noticed was the shift from procurement to talent, right? So we work very closely with our procurement organization. We also work very closely with talent organizations. And as we've shopped this platform out there to other large clients, it's that combination of those two, because procurement looks at it as a dollars and cents transaction, right? And a return on investment transaction. Talent looks at, I want to find the best person to get this job done right in the shortest amount of time possible. And so I think the combination of those two really sort of throw out the rate cards in my mind, right? And sort of allow you to really become flexible. Because I mean, we've got people on our platform that are billing anywhere up to $1,000, $1,100 an hour, as low as down to $17 an hour, right? It depends on the skill set that we need, what the value of that is in the marketplace, and then sort of identifying the right person to sort of move that forward. And what I love it from the contractor's perspective, right? We sort of, are trying to cut out as many of the middlemen in the process. And for them, they're much happier. And the transparency, I think, is happier, right? It enables them to be happier. So this is what we're paying for payroll fees. These are what we're paying for this. This is what you're getting out of this. And so every step of the equation, we're trying to become as transparent as possible, because the last thing you want is someone to say, hey, look, I was billing or I was getting paid $100 an hour. And, oh, by the way, the agency was making $150 or $200 an hour. And I don't know where the rest of that money went. Right. And so, these are just some of the things that we've seen over the last 3 years of running this platform is that sort of shift from procurement only to procurement and talent, and then transparency for contractors really enables them to sort of make smart, effective decisions and, really take control of what they're doing.
That's great. Thanks, Ashir. Really appreciate that perspective.
Could I jump in I want to build on what Brian said, if that's okay. We work with MBO partners. We're a research and consulting firm, and we've been actually surveying highly skilled independent workers that provide services to businesses for a decade. And in terms of their use of online talent platforms, to make a short, just to get short, you know, it was when we started asking the question in 2010, it was basically almost nobody. It was about 1 to 2%. It's up to about 20% today. As of last year, we're about to field this year's survey. But about 1 in 5 say they use online talent platforms. But it's important to note, it's almost entirely as a secondary source or a third source right now amongst this group. It also negatively scales to income and age. So the older the professional is, the less they're using it. The more income that they make, the less they're likely to use it. And so and when we dig deeper in interviews and such, what we hear is, yeah, I'm using it to fill in my schedule. I'm using it to search for new clients. But my core, as Sheila said, the core way I find my business today still is some form of referral or word of mouth. These numbers that I'm talking about are full-time people that are independent and provide services to businesses. And so we've seen definitely the ramp up in the percentages using online talent platforms. The numbers using them full-time is still, or as a primary income source, still very low, particularly when we're talking about these higher income folks.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. That's a really good point. Thanks for sharing that. Hey, Sajeev, I'd love to get your perspective. You always have great insight from not only from Europe, but also working inside Zurich, and you know, this conversation, you always have a lot.
Sure. So a couple of updates. I think on so quick perspective on adoption. I think it's right. The adoption is pretty. It takes a long time to push this across the organization. Steve made a comment about making sure that we are able to train people, orient them towards the end organization's policies. That's something that we should look at. But in addition, I think there's another element that we need to recognize. This will scale up only when people are able to feel comfortable that I will now mandate the use of these platforms. And that will come when there is some sort of metrics that'll come with usage, it'll come over time. But the ability to create those metrics and show that this is actually beneficial, either financially or from an outcome perspective, the lack of metrics is a key inhibitor. So that's something Balaji and I were having a discussion as well. And that's something that we need to think through as a community and how to address that problem.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Hey, Jordy, I'd love to get your perspective on this. You're an investor, and I mean, you know, from a perspective of, you know, having a bunch of folks off platform, but obviously growing quickly to be on platform, the highest skill. Do you look at that as a negative for the space, or as a positive for the space, as an opportunity? Like, how would you look at that from an investment standpoint?
It's a good question. I mean, I think it's I think it could be. I think it's a positive, although, you know, over time, I think it becomes critical for, you know, related to broader adoption. And where it sits in the adoption curve is how, you know, what the lens of what we're looking at. I think it probably varies by vertical too, in terms of that skilled versus unskilled, or, you know, full-time versus part-time, you know, perspective would be there. So we're actually doing some research around this that I'm going to share with you next week.
Great.
That maybe we can follow up on.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'd love to hear it from your perspective. That's for sure. For sure. Thanks. Hey, Steve Rayner, you've been listening to this, but you've also been doing a great job of filling the, you know, lots of good comments in the chat. So any thoughts? You mentioned actually the book Range. I just bought that, so I'm psyched to dig into it.
Yeah, I thought that was super interesting in just trying to kind of show how the shift is away from what academics have been focusing on, which is depth and expertise. And now with networked ecosystems, you need fewer of those, but what you're really missing is people that can connect all the dots and put things together. So super interesting book. I think it's great stuff. Wow, there's so many things about this conversation that's just lit me up in different parts of my brain. One of the things that I think is different about this emerging economy that we don't give enough credence to is that it's not all about the money. And I've often said that in open innovation challenges, we see it all the time, that it's gold, guts, glory, and good. And this idea that is beginning to play more of a part in what people care about, that they really are kind of like, look, you're not the boss of me anymore. You're not actually working in my interest as a traditional organization. I need to take that on, and I can do that more flexibly. And I think the more platforms as they start to compete for talent, I think that's going to be a key thing, right? Is what are you providing the freelancer? Why are they going with you, through you, and repeating? And why are they not going off and just using you as an initial match? And I think it's going to be these other things, these other challenge, reputation, learning. I don't know how many times Michael Burdick's platform just flashes up in my head, because he was very focused on making sure it's for the freelancers, and I think people are going to start looking for that. There are still going to be people that it's all about the money, and those people are going to find what's best for them, and that's fine. But I think more and more there is a segment of this new workforce that's looking for more, and they're looking to make a difference. They're looking to learn and really engage in interesting projects. They're looking to create an ecosystem, which over and over, I think a lot of freelance work is seen as drive-by hiring. And I think the winners in all this are going to figure out how to use this to build ecosystems, right? Diane, you're always nodding at that, because that's your message, and it's awesome, and I love that. So there's so many great things going on here, and I love it. On my side, I'm excited because I finally have meetings with our human capital folks, and they're excited about our new contract where we actually can hire freelancers. So I'm jazzed right now for that. So
that's great. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for telling that. Hey, Kelly from Arrow. I don't know if you want to add anything. I know you guys have been doing some really cool stuff at Arrow with freelancer.com. So do you want to add any thoughts to this?
Yeah, I think, from our perspective, I would agree with a lot of what is said in terms of having something more meaningful than just transactional on platforms. Thinking about how you can create communities and connections and reasons to be there other than just a very cold transaction type of site is what we're kind of looking at and learning. Other than that, I think it's interesting to see in these times, and testing, especially when you're doing some A/B testing, on what works, what's not working, what's because of COVID. You're really in this foggy state of the unknown right now, and you're trying things and you're testing things. Would they be different in a different environment? What if things start getting better? So those are some of the things we continually think about. But going back to what I just heard, making it about the freelancers and developing community, I'm really excited about that. I really think that, we focus on buyers and we focus on the sell, but if you create a meaningful place for the people that are working there or on that site, talent is going to be what wins at the end of the day. Particularly for us, we're in the engineering space. So having that key source of talent, much more depth and breadth is really important. And bringing that talent to the platform and having that to showcase, I think is especially important. And then you have to have them want to be there too. So that's sort of what I would add to the conversation.
That's great, Kelly. Thanks. Hey, Kelly, I've been super impressed by what you guys have been doing, from just the early days. And would you be willing to share with the group just what you guys are doing at Arrow and how you guys are building out what you're building?
Yeah, definitely. So we partnered with freelancer.com primarily because, we were focused on engineering services, and in order to scale something like engineering services, you typically need to digitize it. And there were things that were happening at that time, multi-sided marketplaces and, things that were catching our attention. So for us, our goal was not to necessarily have services for everyone. Freelancer already does that, Upwork already does that. we really wanted to focus on curating or creating a talent marketplace that focused only on one skill. Engineering services is really hard, really hard. I'm not an engineer. But I think, there's value in that. Primarily, I don't know if anyone knows Arrow as a whole, but we're a components distributor. So we're a $30 billion top line company that's kind of fragmented into two pieces. One is components distribution, and the other one is enterprise computing solutions. So, like servers, whether they're sitting on Earth or up in the cloud. So that's our business. And complementary to that really is engineering services. People aren't buying parts for bookends. They're doing something with those. So to be able to expand our offering was really important to us. And I think riding this wave, or at least participating in testing and seeing, would people be able to take an offline motion and bring it online? So what Aero Plus does is similar to those platforms in matching supply and demand. So people who are entrepreneurs, innovators, who have an idea and just don't know where to begin, don't know where to go for engineering services, can come to Aero Plus. A lot of times when you see people win competitions and get money to bootstrap, they go to traditional companies and they need 50 to 60 grand to do a prototype. That is not within their budget. At Aero Plus, you could get similar resources, right? Because they don't have the back end and all of the extra costs that go with it, and get that prototype done for 5 grand, 10 grand. And that's really helping people take their ideas and bring them to market. The other piece that I would say are even current workforce engineers, engineering managers, particularly in engineering services. You can't own every single engineering skill out there. They morph and multiply. It's one of the fastest growing areas. And so if you're an engineer who either wants to offload some tasks, or you want to, you need a niche skill set and you don't want to hire an internal resource for that niche skill set, you can get that done through a tool like this.
That's great, Kelly. Thanks. Yeah, I've been super impressed from the early days when I started talking to Tony about what you guys were doing with Freelancer, and I encourage everybody to check it out. I think it's a really great example of a demand-side client really thinking about it. If you put it in the context of Diane's thinking, it's really about building an ecosystem of talent around the organization, and I'm really, it seems like culturally you guys have really gotten the organization to buy into it, so it's really, really inspiring. So, hey, Balaji, what's on your plate? You've been listening here for a while. Any thoughts? Any ads?
I think we've touched on some really, really big topics today. I feel like I think the big takeaways for me are the types of people that you need are the people that everybody spoke about. The people that can get you $250, $300 an hour, where 10% there matters so much more than $30 or $40 an hour, where 20% still gets you $6. But the problem is the value proposition for them is really challenged as to why they need the marketplace. But I think which still comes back to the conversation that I think this has been my personal opinion, that we should not be doing conversations about individual by individual, hand-to-hand combat per role, because it's not a profitable proposition. The cost of sale is very high. The revenue per transaction is very low. The company has way too many individual buyers, so there's no relationship scale. You might sell to a company, sell to an individual, but that doesn't mean that the next 100 jobs are going to come to you. And the world is already moving to, I think the place where marketplaces will evolve to is managed services companies, which is they own outcome, they own capacity, and they use the freelancers at the back end to serve capacity and serve outcomes. And I think the trend for that is already on. Right? People have been the trend for outsourcing and offshoring and automation is in full swing right now, or it has been in full swing for a decade now. So I think the conversation around talent that we talk about, if people are more focused on getting stuff done, there's so much more. Everybody wants to talk about automation and getting things onto bots and conversational AI. That's not about people. It's about getting shit done. And I think the more we move to morph into how do we outsource how do freelance marketplaces take over functions, talk about hundreds of jobs or thousands of jobs. So you reduce your cost of your sale and actually create a more dependable, more sticky value proposition is key. Hand-to-hand combat per individual role, having individual conversation about rates is just too expensive and does not lead to scale.
Mm-hmm. Great points. Thanks, Balaji. No, I think that's totally right. And I love your perspective of, I actually the same thing, the perspective of kind of, starting to think about outcomes instead of just, delivering components to get something done. But that's, to me, that's a big shift. And, let's just get shit done and make it happen. Cool, thanks. Hey, Kirsten, you're really great at offering some, cultural perspective on things. And I always love your kind of high level thinking. Any thoughts from our conversation today, and what just, shifted in your mind or at least piqued your interest?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I continue to build off of, not surprisingly, what Steve said and others around the focus of impact and breakthrough kind of innovation, if we want to use those terms, as being a core area of focus. Something that I'm particularly working on right now, which I'm really energized by, is how to combine open innovation and some of the practices around design thinking actually with urban planning to create a new influence in future developments. We have an architecture practice at Sidley, and we work with a lot of developers, and it's so interesting to see how far behind or just how comfortable or complacent, right, developers are, and how citizens, public, private, and increasingly researchers and experts aren't involved in the conversation. So we're working on, hopefully building out some interesting new process and kind of potentially platform in the space of future urban development and planning to be more focused on health-oriented developments, and that really creates, a new collaboration from citizens and public and private sectors. So again, I think, and that's kind of within one world. And then in another world, I was saying this within the breakout session that we were in, I'm continued to be obsessed, I think is a pretty good word, around how to continue to drive more organizational connection. So when we start talking about platforms and ecosystems, how do we get brands and organizations to start to work together that really drives breakthrough for the industry or the category they're in? And I think, the conversation we're getting really into right now is, again, language around brand action, but for organizations that really want to stop talking about the things that they're going to do and start to move forward, be it based on their business models or where they're going to be investing money, because so seldom are these problems unique. And really, I think that the outcome is really through how do we start to cooperate. And a big focus that I have is how do we start changing some of that organizational narrative from, competitive advantage to, cooperation and continued collaboration. So those are just some of the things that I'm working on. And again, fueled by this conversation and just, what everyone can contribute to, I think, create big impact.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And that I remember that the first time you brought that up was kind of, I think it was very early on in our calls, this idea of organizational collaboration and co-creation. And I think that's so critical to, for everything. I mean, it just feels like, I think you also mentioned the idea that, we've gone from a knowing culture to a learning culture. And, it's really easy to be, if you're a knowing culture, you're kind of isolated. You want to, protect your knowledge. In the learning culture, you're always kind of trading, right? It's a horse trading situation where I've got some knowledge here. What can I learn? How do I trade that off? And I think that's a big shift for a lot of companies, and it's going to be really hard. It's going to be the ones that succeed are not only going to be learning organizations, but also collaborative organizations. So yeah, thanks for that. Well, speaking of collaboration, hey, Catherine, you want to give us an update on the design sprint next week? Sorry, I've been out of touch. I know a lot of people have been emailing me. I kind of tried to turn off some of my electronics over the week, so if I haven't gotten back to you, I apologize for that. But Catherine, give us an update. Are you there? Maybe
too many things off. Yeah, so we're getting started on Monday, July 13th. We're gonna meet 3 days for 4 hours each from noon to 4. And Douglas Ferguson and John from Voltage Control are running the sprint. We've invited a whole slew of folks to join for the sprint, as well as a few folks to join for these How Might We's, which are going to be some 15-minute interviews with a few folks that will really drive some conversation and inputs into our planning process. If anybody has questions about the sprint, let us know between now and Monday, and then we'll be providing updates on our weekly calls just about what we have accomplished and share out any deliverables that come out of it and that type of thing.
Yeah, great, Catherine. Yeah, I mean, our goal here is to get everybody involved. And unfortunately, Design Sprint, we had to limit the participation a bit for this first phase. But then we'll open it back up to get everybody's input and involvement. So really appreciate it. We've got a few more minutes. Anybody else have anything that would love to share or comments or anything?
Hi, John. This is Adam here.
Hey, Adam, how are you?
Good, thanks. I just wanted to touch upon the notion that Balaji mentioned, that really companies really require solutions that get things done and ideally cost effectively. And actually at Agents Republic, what we do is that we are pretty much opening up to the conversation on AI solutions. And just to give a background, so what we do, we are a call center, and we are a cloud-based, 100% cloud-based call center, and employing agents, or actually contracting with agents from all over the world. And they are working from home, and this is how we provide customer support. And what we are thinking about and what we are currently doing, we started to generate conversational AI discussions. So these are simulated conversations between two agents about a specific topic. And we record these conversations. And at the moment, what we do is that we sell these conversations to tech companies. And these serve as an input to the AI algorithm. So this is what we do at the moment. But our strength is really that we can provide multilingual support. And oftentimes the problem is that companies don't really want to pay for dedicated agents. And in these instances, what we are thinking about right now is to introduce the AI, conversational AI, and get some sort of solution for those foreign language support needs of the companies.
That's great. Thanks for adding that. I think that's an important thing, right? Where does AI and machine learning enter into this kind of talent space? If nobody's read, or if those of you haven't read the Harari book, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, it really blew my mind. I think there's a whole section of work in there, but I think it's bigger than work. And I think that's the thing, Steve, I love about Steve Rader, your conversations, always thinking about, yeah, work's great, but there's so many other concerns, learning and culture and how, societal issues that, work is just part of that. And so anyway, I would encourage that. And thanks, Adam, for bringing that up, because I think it's important for all of us to continue to think about things just beyond, matching talent to task. So, well, we're right at the time. Anybody, one last thought? Anybody have any last thoughts? If not, I'll wrap this up. Awesome conversation as always. But anybody else?
I just can't believe this stuff hasn't gotten stale. This group continues to just light me up. So thanks everybody.
I echo that
I
too.
love it, man. I totally feel so. Darren, what'd you say?
Yeah, I just said I echo that. I was actually connected with Gabe. We've worked together on projects before. This was his first call, and he had messaged me, and he was like, dude, this is the most densely rich hour ever. I was like, I know, you're going to start blocking these off on Thursday. So
Well, I feel the same way. What an honor to be with so many amazing people, so smart. I always walk away from here, just my mind just it hurts because my brain's expanding and learning. So thanks again for a great hour. Once again, we'll see you guys next week. We'll have lots to report over the sprint and want to get a lot of input from everybody. So really, really appreciate it. Super grateful for everybody. Have a really great, fun, and safe weekend. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.